everyone, and welcome to the fifth in this series of our online ECR seminars. And today we've got two speakers, which is really exciting. Our first speaker is Renée, and Renée founded two companies already, which is very impressive. In 2008, she founded What's On, and in 2016, Renée founded Curiosity Box, which is actually the UK's first STEM subscription box. So we're really looking forward to hearing from Renée today. And then our second speaker is going to be Rhoda, and Rhoda's a STEM ambassador. And Rhoda's going to let us know what that entails to be a STEM ambassador and how you guys can even become one too. So just to start off with a bit of housekeeping. So I think some of you may have already been to our seminars, but you can submit questions via YouTube. You do need to have an account, a Google account, but if you don't have one, you can just send your question to the admin team, that email at the bottom there. But how today's going to run is slightly different. So we're going to have Renée speak first with some questions directed to Renée afterwards, and then we're going to have Rhoda's talk after that. Rhoda's not going to have time to take questions today, so if anyone would like to email questions, again, use that email and I'll pass them on to Rhoda. Great, so Renée, if you are happy to get started, it'd be great if you could get going. Thank you very much for speaking today.
No, it's a pleasure. And I hope that some of this will give people who perhaps like me weren't particularly cut out for life in a lab, some other ideas and options. And not that there's anything wrong with life in a lab, but it really isn't the thing for everyone. And I finished my biochemistry training and quite quickly left the lab. And I thought what might be most helpful is just to start where it started for me, where public engagement, science communication started for me, which was actually during my undergraduate. And at that time, there were no public engagement schemes. There was no such thing as STEM ambassadors, certainly not in Australia. And I was really interested in forensic pathology. And so I started volunteering at our local hospital mortuary in my final year and absolutely loved it. And one of the things that they had on site at the hospital was a museum of body parts that had been set up for a couple of years, but it was a bit run down. And so I was involved in helping to kind of regenerate and reinvigorate this project. And it involved collecting sort of body parts that had really something unusual about them and putting them in and storing them in the museum. And then also thinking about how we could utilize that as a resource to get people in and excited about anatomy and biology and interested in that. So we had lots of medical students, but also some members of the public. We had public days where the public could come in and have a look as well. So that was really my first experience of public engagement. And I think one of the things that I kind of learned from there was just how exciting it was to be able to fuse two things that I love doing, which is science and talking to people. And I didn't really think at that time that this was something that you could make a career of. And there weren't many career options at that point in time. But as we go through my journey, hopefully you'll see that that has changed quite a bit. So this is a kind of snapshot of my career. It has definitely not been a linear, predictable career. So I'll kind of do a bit of a whistle-stop tour through the things that I've done. So after studying and after I did that anatomy project, I decided I needed to get out of Australia and to go traveling. And I arrived in the UK and my intention was not to stay here. And that's been 20 years now, so that didn't quite work out. But anyway, I got a job in what was then the National Patient Safety Agency. And my job was to go around to maternity wards and to collect adverse incidents and feed them into a system where we could do root cause analysis. And through that experience, it was a kind of a small pot of government money to test out the idea of doing something on a national basis around patient safety. And so we were sitting, my team and I were sitting at the heart of lots of different stakeholders, doctors, scientists, patients, the media, politicians, lots of different stakeholders. And what I found I really enjoyed doing was thinking about how to communicate quite complex scientific ideas and medical ideas to those lots of different stakeholders, almost like being a translator for science. And my boss there was a fantastic woman named Kirsten Knox, who has been one of my greatest mentors in my career. And I'd say that whatever it is you choose to do, whether it stay in the lab or move out into something else, having a great mentor is invaluable. And she got offered a job setting up a national cancer research network in Oxford. Again, a new pot of government money and a kind of blank slate to start something new. And she asked me if I'd come to Oxford with her. So I jumped at that chance, came to Oxford, and again, we were in the heart of building something from scratch that involved lots of different stakeholders. This was all about trying to get new translational cancer medicines into the clinic more quickly. And at that point in time, there wasn't a lot of patient involvement in research. In fact, one of the things that we didn't necessarily instigate it. There was other stuff going on at the time, but we were very heavily involved in what became the patient involvement kind of groups and that becoming a normal thing, which at the time when I first learned that wasn't normal, it blew my mind that you could have something like cancer and not have patients involved in discussion about the research and where funding goes, was something that to me was just completely normal, should have been normal. Through that work as well, we started doing some public events. So we wanted to break down barriers between the public and the cancer research community. And so we ran a series of lab open days, a national lab open day project, where across a week, labs across the country could open their doors and invite people in. And that for me was a really one of my wow moments, because just seeing how excited people got just being able to be let in to a place that they weren't able to normally go was just like, bing, this one of those moments where you think, oh, that's amazing. And why can't we do more of this sort of thing more often? And that will be a theme that carries through a lot of what I've done since then. During my time at Oxford, a number of other things happened. I started working with Len Seymour, and we set up what was then, and I have intentionally left the old logo in there, the British Society for Gene Therapy. So this was before the stem cell stuff was included in there. So back in 2003, we established BSGCT, and I was part of the board then, and I had a responsibility for public engagement. So as a new scientific society, it was really important, and I think that was acknowledged by that position, that public engagement was something that the society wanted to do. And I think it's really stuck true to those values ever since, and it's only really growing in terms of what the society has achieved. So that's been, I think, a real gold standard of how scientific organizations like that can and should operate. Through that, I also started getting a little bit involved with some of the work of the European Society for Gene and Stem Cell Therapy. And then in 2006, actually 2005, I was actually seconded on a malaria research project. So similar to the Cancer Research Network, it was looking at how we could set up an international malaria research network to get lots of research groups working together more efficiently and effectively. And I fell pregnant with my first baby. And that wasn't exactly planned. So I had to make some kind of, think about what I was going to do with my career, factoring in a family. And the funding for the Cancer Research Network, and therefore my secondment money as well, was coming to an end pretty much at the same time as my maternity leave. So I was like, okay, I've got to think about the things that I love and what I'm going to do next. I knew that I wanted to come back to work, but I also wanted to try and be a half decent mother as well and give time to that. So when it was time to come back to work, I thought I'm just going to start freelancing. There were at that time there were no paid public engagement roles in certainly in the University of Oxford, and I think most universities didn't at that time have that. And really the only jobs in science communication were like writing for newspapers, being a science correspondent, or a few jobs in some big organizations like the Wellcome Trust, etc. So I thought, yeah, I'm just going to freelance and see what happens. And one of the first jobs I got was working for the ESGCT. So that carried on, and they're still one of our clients with What's On. After about 2 years, I I started getting more work than I could really handle myself. And so I set What's On up and started getting some other people on board to help me with that. And essentially what What's On does is manages scientific associations. So we help them do everything from run their events to manage their memberships, help them to raise money and professionalize their kind of whole structure. So we offer a whole range of services, and that's been really great fun. Some of the other contracts I got, one of my favorite ones really was running the Oxfordshire Science Festival. And at that time, again, there was a kind of a collaborative, a co-op of organizations in Oxford that had been running something a bit like a festival, but they wanted to formalize that. And I came in and helped them to grow that. And one of the things I really wanted to do through the Science Festival was to make sure that we created a concept essentially of a no barrier event. So a lot of times when people do public engagement, they think that doing something wonderful like making it free and opening the doors of a museum will encourage more diverse people to attend. And what we observed was that actually that's still not enough. Asking people to come to a museum and open that door is a barrier in itself. And so our concept was, let's not think about welcoming people into our illustrious world of science, but taking our science to them in places where they're comfortable, where people are used to communicating with each other, and see if by doing that we can engage a different audience. And we did that really successfully. We opened up the concept of running events in kind of all kinds of random places. And that was clearly something that was becoming a thing at that time, because other initiatives like Pint of Science, Soapbox Science, things like that also started emerging in that time. One of the things that became very apparent to me doing all of the work that we'd been doing public open days with the societies, doing the Science Festival, I'd also been running quite a lot of science clubs in schools, was that when you give kids hands-on activities to do, they light up, they love it. It doesn't matter how sciencey they think they are or not, they will get engaged and get involved. And so we had a kind of, with What's On, we had a sort of development session and thought, okay, what can we do with this? What do we want to do next? What's our focus and vision going to be? And one of the things that came out of that was that we just wanted to give more kids, as many kids as we possibly could, that opportunity to have hands-on science experiences. And I'd been a STEM ambassador for quite a long time, so I'd been doing bits and pieces in schools, and I knew other people were doing that. And we didn't want to duplicate, so we thought, okay, we're going to send this to families at home. And this is how Curiosity Box was born, really thinking about trying to overcome some of the challenges that schools, particularly state primary schools, were facing, delivering really fun and engaging hands-on STEM classes by giving parents and families the tools to be able to do some more fun stuff at home. And it has been a fairly wild ride. You know, I'm a scientist, I'm not a business person, so I've had to learn an awful lot along the way, but it's also opened up some amazing opportunities, including lots of time on radio. I do a regular science show on BBC Oxford, as well as sort of irregular radio slots on lots of other channels. I got to do a TED talk on curiosity, which was pretty amazing. And Curiosity Box in the last year, you know, this for me has always been about trying to reach kids, particularly those who are born or have very low levels of science capital. And I wanted to, you know, it's about getting to them. And in the last year, we've been able to do that more than ever through, actually, thanks to COVID, it's been a real opportunity for us. And we've managed to work with food banks and charities and send science and engineering kits that have sort of been souped up to give basic resources as well, to just over 30,000 disadvantaged kids in the UK. So that has been, I think, probably one of the most rewarding parts of my career so far. Things that I considered doing but didn't do along the way, which I think is kind of an important gap, you know, that we want to make sure that when we make choices, there's always going to be something that you don't, not necessarily lose, but that you don't do. And for me, the first one, when I was looking at Curiosity Box or considering doing things in boxes, I also looked at the idea of doing science shows and science parties and things like that. And the reason I didn't do that was partly because there were already some people starting to do that sort of quite seriously, and I didn't want to duplicate. I'm not the sort of person who kind of, you know, I like blazing my own trail, I guess, and I also don't like waste. But also I considered that actually that would take out most of my time that I would normally want to be spending with my family. So weekends and things like that, I wanted to try and keep at least to myself. So rather than doing science shows, the aim was really to then think about how we could complement what other people were doing by providing a different kind of resource that achieved a similar aim. I also looked at public engagement jobs in universities, and these were and are now much, much more prevalent than they were when I first left the university environment. The reason I didn't do that and I ended up kind of going out on my own was largely down to speed. So I knew I had a pretty clear idea about what I wanted to achieve and the impact I wanted to have. And I found that working in a big organization like university was quite cumbersome and slow to get things done. And I'm pretty impatient. So I just went off and did it myself. But that was certainly one of the things that I think a lot of people now, it's a great way to get started. I also looked at sort of seriously looking into journalism and radio at various points through my career. And the reason I didn't do that was, I think, mainly because it's just so competitive. And I was getting a little bit of that in what I was doing anyway. And I thought that's probably enough. I don't think it wasn't the kind of the area that I wanted to focus taking risks in. So stepping away from me, along the way, I have met lots of people working in SciComm and loads of different jobs. And I thought it might be helpful just to pull together a bit of a word cloud of the sorts of jobs that I think are out there and available if you're interested in this kind of thing. And I know Rhoda is going to be talking about STEM ambassador work, which is kind of where you can keep your feet in both camps and be an active research scientist and also do some STEM engagement. These are jobs where you can actually do it as a paid professional job. And I have weighted the bigger words are the ones where I've met the most people. So these are the ones where I think by proxy that might mean that there are the most jobs. So things like university outreach and university public engagement jobs are obviously very popular. Research funders like the Wellcome Trust and others, there are plenty of other charities and government organizations that fund research, and more they're being required to have to show that they are doing public engagement, and oftentimes they don't really know how to do that. So getting somebody who can come in and help them to do that is a valuable thing, and there are positions there to be found. Museums is an interesting one because I would have said that was probably the most obvious way that people, particularly if you want to do the kind of demo presenting sort of science communication, that's the most common route in. But obviously in the last year, we've not seen, poor museums have had it pretty tough, and I don't know when they're going to start back up again really, or what that's going to look like in terms of what they can afford. So museums is a definite yes, but kind of on hold until we know what COVID is, what impact that's going to have on the museum sector. Science festivals, obviously, again, sort of falls into that similar category. Normally a great way of having a go, getting your foot in the door, getting to know people who do science communication. But while they're virtual, I think it's a little bit harder probably to get access to those. Something that certainly surged in the last year has been a whole raft of different online digital ways of doing science communication. I've made most of these kind of small, so things like blogging, sort of independent journalism, so just sort of freelance writing for various online magazines and newspapers, digital media and social media. I don't know, there have been quite some great examples like Sam Longford, who has set up the Global Science Show since lockdown started. So I think opportunities for that have opened up. What I don't know is how easy it is to monetize that into at least enough to pay you a salary to have it as a job. But certainly as a way of doing science communication, those can be incredibly powerful, and your reach can be huge and international with much less effort than trying to make activities that are physical and send them out in a box, which is a quite hard way of doing that kind of reach. Obviously, I fall into the entrepreneur category, and I have kept that quite small because although I love it, I recognize that it's not necessarily for everyone. It does feel like it takes a kind of leap of faith to get into it, because you have to take a fair bit of risk up front in terms of putting yourself on the line out there and not necessarily earning a salary immediately. And I absolutely acknowledge that I was very fortunate to have, like, my husband was earning, so I had some flexibility in terms of not needing to have a full salary immediately, which gave me the space to be able to grow the business. Other large organizations like Science Oxford is one of the ones locally here that obviously employs loads and loads of people, and there are many of those across the country that have a STEM remit, and they will all have a whole range of different kinds of jobs depending on how public facing you want to be or how much behind the scenes you want to be. And then I think that the last thing I wanted to just finish on was why do any of this at all? For me, the most powerful currency is to see someone's face light up with a wow moment when they have understood something for the first time or discovered something new, or just that, like this little girl's face over here, like this is my currency. I love this so much. And every time this happens, it fills me up with joy. So for me, there is a personal impact on every person that you engage with, where you never know where that moment, that little spark, that little wow moment, you never know where that might take them in life. And for me, it's much less about trying to get kids to choose science as a career. Obviously, it'd be nice if some of them did, but it's much more about building science capital in anyone I engage with. It's about making people just see the world through the lens of science a little bit more, because I think that brings a huge amount of joy and capability into people's lives. And this number down here is one that I'm very proud of. It's quite a big number, but it's only halfway to my mission. So my mission is to engage or give 1 million young people a wonder-filled experience of science. We're up to just over 500,000. So we're on our way, but we've still got a little way to go yet. And that's all from me.
Oh, thank you so much, Renée. That's been really inspiring to hear your passion for engaging with children and sort of public engagement in science comm. So thank you so much. You'll be happy to hear we have lots of questions.
Oh, great.
So let's get started. We've got Nora Clark from Imperial. Part one of her question is, how have you found that COVID remote activities has changed engagement? Has there been an increase in interest, do you think?
So I think that there are actually two parts to that answer. The answer to that, I think the first is that COVID itself has completely repositioned science in the public consciousness. It has been in our face more than ever before, trying to understand graphs, trying to understand risk, thinking about vaccination and clinical trials and how the public understands statistics. You know, it's this huge thing that we've all been sort of chipping away at for a long time, has been brought right to the front of all of our consciousness. So I think in terms of the demand from the public to want to engage with and understand science, it's bigger and much more demanding than ever before. Ironically, I think a lot of traditional public engagement activities have been unable to happen. So one thing that we have done a lot of over the last year is work with organizations, university outreach teams, for example, that normally go out and do face-to-face work. And we have worked with them to adapt our kits to try and help them to deliver so they can do virtual stuff, but the children have still got a hands-on component to that.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think if I've got an example here. I don't think I've got one to hand. But yeah, that's happened quite a lot, and we're still doing that. So still quite a lot of science clubs and things like that haven't been able to happen. And we've been trying to plug a bit of a gap by sending physical resources so that people continue giving a really valuable and interactive experience, because I think a lot of kids particularly are very Zoom exhausted, Zoom saturated. Yeah. So anything purely digital, I don't know, it's harder.
Yeah, may not go down. Yeah, I guess you're quite well suited for, because you've got that platform for being able to deliver these boxes to children's homes. So I can imagine.
Yeah, and we've built our own manufacturing sort of process, and we build everything here, just behind me over there, actually.
Really? Oh, wow.
So it makes it much easier for us to adapt. So if someone says, oh, we're doing this science club on water, what kind of things can you give us? Then we can kind of pick and choose and put something together that feels a bit bespoke for what they're doing.
Yeah, I was going to ask on that point. So if someone approached you at a university or whoever, and they had an idea, could you take on their idea and make it for them, or do you feel that you like to have a contribution to the idea as well?
Usually it's a team effort. I mean, obviously I come with quite a lot of expertise in how to do this stuff. So normally when we work with partners, they want our involvement, and we've built, I think, a really positive, fun brand with Curiosity Box as well. So a lot of organizations want to have that kind of affiliation. We've just launched, actually, this is our newest school box with Bloodhound, the engineering, the fastest car.
Oh, wow.
So this is a really good example of how we can work together. This is a teacher book for a school pack that gives kids and schools the ability to run a STEM day that's completely hands-on. So yes, we do partner up and do that kind of thing with different organizations. The big challenge for me is that I get really excited whenever someone comes with a new idea. I'm like, oh yeah, that's so exciting. And it takes up a lot of time and energy and resource to develop something new. So the biggest challenge really is measuring my expectations of what we can actually achieve.
Yeah. Oh, great. So the second part to Nora's question is, do you see remote engagement carrying on sort of past COVID? Do you think it will continue to be a useful tool, or do you think it will sort of run its course when we go back to being in person?
I think it will definitely continue. I think some of it will fall away. I think we've probably had a kind of a surge, and there'll be the things that have perhaps hit the mark with people slightly less will probably tail off. But there are, like the Global Science Show, I'm sure that will keep going. We're working with the Great Science Share this year, and they're doing lots of virtual stuff, which I think will stay, because it opens up opportunities to reach audiences that we wouldn't have physically been able to do.
Yeah, definitely. I think also it makes it quite easy for people to be able to join these things, just from the comfort of their own home.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so we have another question from Lisa from the University of Glasgow. Lisa asks, are jobs and public engagement really competitive? How much public engagement should you be aiming to do during your PhD?
Answer to the first question is yes, I think they are quite competitive. It depends on what kind of thing you want to do. Like if you want to become a Maddie Moat and do, be on CBeebies presenting science, that's going to be super, super competitive. If you want to work in publishing and do something that's about sort of written communication, then there's probably a lot more opportunity with that. So it's kind of a hard question to answer with one answer.
Yeah.
I think it has certainly become much more competitive because there are a lot more people who, I think there are fewer long-term job career options in academia, which is pushing people to think outside of that traditional route. But also I think, it's accepted that actually it's a really valuable thing to do, science communication. And so there are lots more people who want to do it. In terms of how much time you should do in your PhD, it's a really hard balance to get right, because obviously you want to get your PhD done. I would say that through the work in the Science Festival, the value that PhD students particularly got out of getting out of the lab and coming and participating in a Science Festival, listening, thinking about how they communicate their research to a non-expert, and then listening to the kind of questions that people asked of all ages, was a massively valuable experience. So in terms of translatable skills, in terms of keeping your motivation going, all of those sorts of things. I think I'd be aiming to do something that you feel that you can manage to fit in. And I realize I've kind of skirted around the answer there, but I think that's probably the safest.
I think you've highlighted the value of doing something like public engagement during a PhD, because as you said, it allows you to think about how you can communicate your research. It maybe poses questions you've never thought of from a child, things like that. I found it very valuable in my PhD, and our supervisor's really keen for us to do it as much as possible. But I think you're right, is trying to balance it with your lab work is the tough part.
Yeah.
Great. So from Anna, so she says, "Hi Renée, what is your most popular curiosity box, and were you surprised by this?"
That's such a good question. Mainly because it just makes me happy.
Yeah.
So it used to be, until about the last 6 to 12 months, our most popular box was probably our potions box. And I think that's because just who doesn't love mixing stuff together and making potions? However, in the last year, we've had a massive surge. We have a box called the Bake Off Lab, and it's all about the science of baking. And you make things like you make a different recipe to figure out the ultimate dunkable biscuits and various things like that. And that has become it's gone bonkers this year. And I don't know whether it's just because it's really accessible. So for mums and dads at home homeschooling their kids, when they see something like, okay, it's about baking, I can do that. Maybe that's a barrier that's removed for them to thinking they can engage with it. My favorite box is our Healthy Me box, because it has an activity in there called Edible Poo, which is just the best. I love doing that with kids. It's great.
I wonder if the baking, as well as, everyone's become a bit of a home cook over COVID.
Yeah,
maybe that's
quite possibly
on as well.
Yeah.
Really interesting. Okay, so we've got some questions from Anthony. So public outreach is becoming a key element of grant proposals, especially larger collaborative ventures. Question 1, why do you think this is becoming a priority?
I think it needs to be. I think it always should have been. And the reason is because most of that grant funding is coming from public resources, whether directly through donations or indirectly through taxes. So essentially, scientists should be accountable to the public that's paying for that research. And I think that was a very unpopular opinion for a long time, because science was something that happened behind closed doors. And I think the world we live in has just forced those doors open. And the public deserve to know what's going on. And I think the more open we are, more transparent we are like that, the more likely it is we're going to be investing money in research areas that matter to people, which I also think is really important.
Yeah, I think it was interesting what you said earlier about quite often students are researching on a disease, and the patient has absolutely no idea that this research is going on. And I think many people on this call maybe will relate to that it seems as a scientist you could be so far away from the patients that actually suffer from that disease. So I think it's really interesting that that's becoming more important. It seems like an obvious thing that it should be important that your research is communicated back to patient groups, but that seems...
Well, I think it works both ways as well. I think when you have a disease, especially if it's a chronic disease, you become an expert in that. And you know more than your doctors do normally, because you've had the full life experience, not just the bit of the medical bit of it. And I've been in meetings, certainly when I was doing the cancer research work, where a patient would say that's not going to work because X, Y, and Z practical logistical issue. And if they hadn't been there would have been literally hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of money wasted, because they wouldn't have figured that out until a huge amount of kind of effort and trialing had been done first. So I do think it's really important, not just so that we can be wonderful and share our knowledge, but also that there is a huge amount of value we as the science community can get from different perspectives.
Yeah, on a practical level, yeah, definitely. And then the second part to Anthony's question, could researchers applying to secure a grant with you apply with you /curiosity box to meet the public outreach requirements of their grant?
Oh, that's an easy yes.
Great.
Just get in touch with me. we've done it a few times before. We're in the process of doing it at the moment with a chemistry theatre project, which is really cool, around a production of The Alchemist. But yeah, I'm always open to opportunities and love a wild idea. So that's great.
Oh, great opportunity there. So I think we'll just end. I could go on and on and on, but maybe we'll have to direct some questions to you via email. But my final question is, I know your aim is to achieve 1 million, sort of reach 1 million children, but what's next for you? Do you have any ideas of what might be your next chapter? Or
I think the more I do this work, and certainly over the last year, the more I have seen the impact of poverty on access to education generally, not just STEM education, but all of it. The more furious I am, I guess, the more fire in my belly I have to try and do something to change that. So sort of the immediate step is to make sure that the work we've done through COVID isn't a one-hit wonder, and that we are embedding ourselves in the work we do in organizations that work with children in less advantaged communities.
Yeah.
And longer term, I'd really love to rattle some cages in politics, or in sort of the upper echelons of decision making in our society, because I love asking hard questions, and I think there are a lot of hard questions to be asked at the moment.
Great. Well, I can't thank you enough. I thought that was so interesting, and I hope everyone else found it as interesting as I did, and just so inspiring, as I said before, to hear your sort of passion and your mission. So good luck with hopefully rattling some cages.
Thank you. And if anyone does have any questions, I'm very happy for them to be directed at me. I might not be able to answer them, but I probably know someone who can.
Yeah, well, yeah, the email was probably the best way to do it. We'll pass them on to you, Renée. But thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now we're moving on to the second part, so our second speaker. So Rhoda, thank you so much for joining us. And I think it's going to be really great to hear what it's like to be a STEM ambassador, and how people listening to this call, if they could become one, and what that would entail. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Robin, for having me. Yeah, and thank you to all the attendees. Yes, my name is Rhoda Quist, STEM Ambassador Coordinator at STEM Learning. I am a STEM Ambassador as well, so I've been a STEM Ambassador for 6 years now. But I will share my slides just to give you some more information about it.
That'd be great, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Can you see my slides currently?
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. Okay, so as I mentioned, I'm Rhoda Quist, STEM Ambassador Coordinator for STEM Learning. So I'm part of the London Hub. STEM Learning's mission statement is for all young people to have a world-leading STEM education in the UK. So what we do essentially, I just thought I'd give you a quick whiz. So I sit on the STEM Ambassador Programme, and essentially the STEM Ambassador Programme is our volunteers programme where STEM professionals support young people between the ages of 5 to 19 to have a world-leading STEM education. We don't only support young people, we support teachers, educators, families and community groups. So this can be libraries, scouts, youth organisations, etc. We also have a STEM club programme, essentially where we can support a school or community group with dedicated support from a STEM ambassador, etc., or to host an enrichment project. We do teacher CPD as well. So for example, if a teacher's having to teach chemistry but doesn't come from a chemistry background, we can upskill them to do that. And then we also have enthused partnerships. So this is where employers support schools, so usually a group of schools with a bit of funding to upskill their teachers and to provide a tailored programme for them. But as I mentioned, I sit on the STEM Ambassador Programme, but I thought it would be great to show you the breadth of things that we do at STEM Learning. And essentially why we do this, as you may or may not know, there is a STEM skills gap shortage, and we want to make sure that we're equipping the young people to go into roles that don't necessarily exist now, but just upskilling them to occupy those roles in the future. So in terms of STEM ambassadors, Nationally, we actually have about 40,000 active STEM ambassadors. So I need to change that figure. And they are volunteers from a range of industries, so from academia to public sector, etc. They range from ages 18 through to retirement age, from a diverse background, diverse demographic as well. And to become a STEM ambassador is really simple. We pay for an enhanced DBS check for you. Unless it's on the update service, you'll have to do a complete new check with us. And yeah, we provide you training to feel confident to work with young people and support them in the classroom or outside of the classroom as well. And we ask for a minimum of 1 activity per year to be recorded on our STEM Ambassador website, which we don't think is that much. A lot of the time, people that come on board as STEM ambassadors are already having some form of engagement with young people directly or indirectly. So that can also be recorded retrospectively. So for example, if you came on board today, as a STEM ambassador, but you supported a young person with an activity 3 weeks ago, you can record that retrospectively. And if that was your 1 activity per year, great. But of course, that's the minimum. So in terms of what our ambassadors can do in normal circumstances, usually they'd visit a classroom and support with a range of activities. So for example, a primary school may say they want to speak to a range of scientists. So they may want to speak to a dementia researcher, they may want to speak to a lecturer, they may also want to speak to someone who works in environmental sciences. So this can almost be like a speed networking session that you can take part in. And if you haven't volunteered before, this is a great first activity because you won't be doing it by yourself. Teachers and young people are also really keen on practical activities. So for example, if you can go into a classroom and showcase what you do in industry. So whether that's, for example, you could show a, I'm thinking what can relate. So maybe if you're doing if you do heart surgeries, for example, and you have a sort of practical experiment that you can go into a classroom and show young people what dissections look like. That could be a practical activity. So there's a range of activities that we have. We have a lot of career talks as well. So for example, a lot of teachers and educators are keen to find out how you got into industry. So was it a straight and narrow path? Did you not anticipate yourself being a researcher or working in science? They want to hear about all those really exciting stories. For example, you can also support teachers with activities. So maybe you're not too confident with working directly with young people. You can also support teachers and educators, and we really value that as well. And that could be building a resource of some sort, taking part in their teacher CPD. And I'm not sure if you're aware, for example, in the UK, especially in secondary, a lot of the schools follow the Gatsby benchmarks, which is a series of benchmarks that Ofsted launched in 2017, all around making sure that young people build a stable careers programme. So they're really, really keen on making sure that young people can relate what they're learning in the curriculum to real world careers, encounters with employers and work experience, because for example in the UK work experience is not compulsory anymore. So yeah, that's where our programme comes in, because we're very keen on hosting face-to-face work experience if possible, or even virtual work experience is something that we've done, and that moves me on nicely to what we've done working virtually. So last year was the first year we've pivoted virtually. So since last year, March, we've been only hosting virtual activities for obvious reasons. And some of the activities we've done are insight weeks, where young people can find out about what a certain employer does in industry. So we had Willis Towers Watson, which is like an insurance company. They hosted an insight week, and students got to hear about all the exciting things there. I also did a day in the lab of a scientist with a dementia researcher at UCL, and she spoke about how she got into dementia research, etc., and a little bit about dementia. And that was a great session that we did via Zoom webinars, and it was very interactive for the young people to ask questions. I also had a webinar today, which was really exciting, with WWF Worldwide Fund, and essentially that was around environmental sciences. We had a STEM ambassador who works for Balfour Beatty. talking about her role as an environmental advisor. So there's a range of activities you can get involved in, even taking part in our Twitter Q&A. So that's something that we've launched as well, where we interview STEM ambassadors via Twitter. So yeah, there's a breadth of activities. So how to get involved, really simple. If you register at stem.org.uk, and then you get allocated to a STEM Ambassador Hub. I think it's important to mention that we have 19 hubs across England, so a massive national organisation. As I mentioned, I'm part of the London hub, but there's 18 other hubs across the UK. So depending on where you register your home address, you will be allocated to a hub. So for example, if you work in London, but live outside of London, but you prefer to volunteer in London, then register with a London address, essentially. And then once you've registered, you will complete online induction, which is roughly 45 minutes, gives you an overview of what we do at STEM Learning and professional development training that we have created for you. And then you complete a DBS, which we pay for, which is great, an enhanced DBS, because that is a requirement for safeguarding purposes, of course, and then have your documents verified. And then you're ready to go, essentially, after 3 to 4 weeks, once we've checked your DBS. In terms of your options, so once you do come on board as a STEM ambassador, you can then browse the range of activity requests we have on the STEM Learning website. So teachers and educators put up requests. At any one time, we have about 25,000 activity requests, and you can almost browse that according to what best suits you, whether it's by location or whether it's by activity. So as I mentioned, we have practical activities, we have career talks, we have virtual work experience, working with teachers. There's a range of different types of activities, which are all really, really exciting. And yeah, so once you see an activity that you like, you can then register interest, almost like an ad. You see the ad, you're interested, you express an interest, the teacher or educator gets in contact with you, asks you for more details, and then, yeah, you arrange a date. Usually the dates and times and details are included in the description, but if they're not, you can have those conversations. We've also made a new feature last year called the offer function, where you now can offer out your services instead of the one-way stream of you having to browse activities. You now can say, I'm confident to do a 15-minute career talk, which I believe is a great first activity, talking about yourself. And you can now offer this out to educators. Yeah, so that is, I don't know if there's any questions. I know I've been talking at you. And I'm just wary of time because I actually have another meeting at 1, but I am keen to take any questions that may come along the way. So what else is on offer? Again, there's a range of professional development training that we host as a hub, but also we get external trainers to host. So for example, we've got training which launched last week by the Presenter Network. Who are hosting this training for STEM ambassadors around what makes good presentation skills, things to bear in mind when you're speaking to young people around tone, pitch, jargon, etc. We're also we've created training around unconscious bias, confidence and communication, a range of themes. Also, you can meet the network of STEM ambassadors. So now where all activities are virtual, we've hosted a range of events where STEM ambassadors from different hubs can meet each other, essentially. So you could even be in a call with STEM ambassadors from the Scotland or Welsh hub, etc. Sorry, Robbie, I'm not sure if there's any questions because I can't actually see the chat.
No, it's fine. What I've said is that if anyone has any questions, just because you're tight on time, that we can email them through to you. So that's no problem. We'll just pass that. Great. So that sounds really interesting. I think everyone here who is interested, you've made it very clear that it's all these opportunities are available to you. Just got to go out and find them. And as you said, thousands and thousands of things that you can do. So hopefully everyone gives that a go if they would like to. And thank you so much for coming to speak to us today. I really appreciate it. And I know you need to zoom off now. So
I think so it's just who can be a STEM ambassador? Anyone. As long as you're over the age of 18 and yeah, that's it. So as I said, our STEM ambassadors come from a range of backgrounds, range of industries. We have apprentices through to postdoc researchers, through to master students. I come from a STEM background myself. My first degree is in biochemistry, and I mastered in psychology, and I'm in an outreach role. So we really like to emphasise to young people the importance of STEM skills, which can open a breadth of careers for you. If you are worried about whether you actually qualify as a STEM ambassador, you probably do, but please do feel free to get in contact with me. And it's just a few teacher feedback about how they've found the benefits of having a STEM ambassador in the classroom. And I think that's it from me. And yeah, there's my email address. Please do feel free to drop me a line or ask any questions. But thank you so much for having me.
Great, thank you so much, Rhoda, and thank you for telling us all about these exciting opportunities. And so I'll send any questions your way if there are any. So I know you've got to go, so feel free. I'm just going to share our next session, but thank you very much, Rhoda.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Take care. So just finally, guys, our next event is not until June, so we've got a month in between. And Carly's going to be running this one, and it's CEO of Cheeky Scientist, which I think will be a really interesting talk, because it's about careers in biotech. So thank you so much for joining today, and hopefully you found some of it interesting and inspiring. And if you have any further questions, just please use the BSGCT email, and we'll send them through to Rhoda or Renée. Great, so thank you very much.